Hello, in this short video we're going to look at David Tripp's model of reflection. And David Tripp, writing in 1993, was reflecting on the nature of teaching in the sense that what we do when we reflect is to think about incidents, the kind of what happens of our working lives, what he calls the commonplace events that occur in the everyday life of a classroom. And he was speculating on what might make that more valuable and productive as an exercise. And what he proposes is that we begin to look below the surface of what happens, to ask why and what it means and what should be done about it. And he suggests that something happens when we do this, and that thing is that we elevate those mundane incidents into critical incidents. Now, he gives the example in his own practice of a very minor incident that the class, having been asked about whether they should be given a choice of teacher, they then moved on to a new topic when one of the students harked back to the previous topic, put up their hand and said, well, if a teacher wasn't very much liked, then he'd know, and he'd feel sad if no one wanted to come to his class. And David Tripp had responded and said, well, we finished that one ages ago. Where have you been since then? And reflecting on that incident afterwards, he felt that, in retrospect, that was entirely the wrong thing to have said, and that he ought to respond differently in future. And what he then did was to kind of go a little bit deeper and to ask why he'd responded as he had. And he found that it was actually counter to his own values as a teacher. So he began to then ask what that meant, and he felt that it meant that he was unconsciously mimicking the way he had been taught rather than doing what he believed in. And so he asked then what should be done about that, and he felt then that he needed to make a deep and abiding shift in his whole approach and become conscious of his habits and the sources of his own approach. And that was really for him a root and branch shift in practice that came out of a tiny mundane incident in the classroom. This then is the power of critical incidents in Tripp's view. From the kind of minutiae of common everyday practice can come a significant turning point in the life of the subject, a kind of metamorphosis from one kind of teacher into another. So that, in a nutshell, is Tripp's critical incidents model of reflection. So my question for you, therefore, is how this might compare with other models of reflection. What, for example, are the similarities and differences between Tripp and Kolb? Could you, for example, label the stages that Tripp goes through in his example, critical incident, using Kolb's 4 stages of concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation? Now, you may find that there are key similarities between those two models and one can be overlaid on top of the other, or that they're entirely different and give you different outcomes and benefits.